Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews, featuring this time our wonderful co-artistic producer, Ryan Borochovitz.
Hello, Mac. Good to be
Yes.
here.
Hello.
And featuring yourself, also
Yeah.
co-artistic producer here at Cup of Hemlock.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. So today we're talking about The Huns, written by Michael Ross Albert, directed by Marie Farsi, performed at the Assembly Theatre by the One for One Collective, and it starred Jamie Cavanagh, Breanna Dillon, and Cass Van Wyck.
Mm-hmm.
And it featured a number of off-screen voices. Let's just get into our general thoughts and non-spoilers, because there's definitely some spoiler elements to this piece. Just keep an eye on the speakerphone on the bottom of your screen. When the little voice memo pops up on there, you'll know when our spoilers are a go. But for now, we're gonna kind of just dive in and give you the basics and kind of our general thoughts about the piece. So Ryan, what'd you think? Because you saw the other One for One Collective piece, 2 Minutes to Midnight.
Yes.
So
what
your thoughts of change from this one to that one?
Yeah, well, I'll just go on the record and say I like this one a lot. I like the other one a lot. I think they're pretty on par with each other. It's Michael Ross Albert's clearly, like, he's a very strong playwright. These are very tight scripts that know exactly what they're trying to do. They kind of examine these characters under the microscope in these high intensity situations. And yeah, it's a blast beginning to end. And it's a perfect balance of humor and heart, and while still making some like interesting commentary about the state of the world we live in. And yeah, overall, I was very pleased with this experience, and I think it was a delight. And I would recommend people who would like to go see it without the spoilers to certainly do so, and then come back here and then listen to our in-depth thoughts. How about you? What were your general impressions?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. As the person between all three of us, you, me, and Jill, who does work a 9-to-5 office job, this piece was very close to home. There were definitely times I was sitting back going,
Yes.
Okay, maybe I'm not crazy for feeling certain things that we'll get into. But it was like, wow, okay, Michael Ross Alberts truly hit on some honest truths about kind of just the rat race world that we're all in. So yeah, it was a funny, once again, it's a dark comedy. I will say that. Like, there are definitely some serious topics that they cover, but they don't make it into like a high school after hours Degrassi piece where it's, oh, this happened, and oh, this happened, and oh, I'm having these feelings. Like I could have gone that route very easily, where you could have felt very generic and PSA, that type of thing, and it didn't. I found the way to still hit the comedy and find the kind of that dark comedy, kind of like Four Funerals or Death at a Funeral, those types of high intensity character situations, but yet there's comedy.
Yes, 100%. But it's occurring to me that maybe while we're still in this non-spoiler territory, we should give like a little snapshot of what the play is about for the benefit of those who,
right.
Since this is a review, we should kind of give people who are on the fence, should they see it? And as we've already said, you should certainly go see it. But here's kind
Ryan,
of
we got to see what's in our cups.
We were too excited to talk about the show. We didn't even do our thing about the cups. Yes. Oh wow!
What is in your cup?
Well, I have coffee in my The Cup cup. There you go. Oh,
how office formal of you.
Yes. I'm going to need those by 5 o'clock. That'll be great. How about you? What's in your cup?
Well, on the stage is a prop for one of the characters, and she has her big pink water bottle. So I don't have a pink water bottle, but I do have this water bottle that I take to my office every day and drink like water out of. So right now, as my first drink of the day, I always have some Crystal Light in it. So once again, it's the classic orange tangerine Crystal Light.
Beautiful.
And it's delicious.
Very, very corporate casual. Love it.
Very corporate casual. Yes. So, okay. So yes, we were saying, so what is the play The Huns about?
So yeah, I'm going to try to describe this as non-spoily as possible. But it's essentially, we're introduced to these three characters. Their names are Iris, Shelley, and Pete. And they've just come into their place of work. It's at a tech company. It's in this kind of like very modern office sort of style, we learn as it goes on that they've just moved buildings, and this was like a very like big transition process that's been a bit of a nightmare to undertake this move. And they are getting on a conference call with various stakeholders from across the company, people all over the world. We have some in Montreal, some in Texas, some in the UK.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a nightmare getting all these people on the phone, hearing all of them. One person sounds like they're clearly in a wind tunnel of some kind and is creating a lot of noise. So there's all this like Leanne, who we find out is the secretary / wife of the CEO of the company, Roman.
Well, she's no longer secretary. She's now head of employee
relations or benefits or something to that effect.
Yes.
The title doesn't matter. He married his secretary and gave her a promotion is the gist of it.
The character's name is Roman.
Which we will get back. We will get back to that in a second. It's kind of a lot of this frustration of these characters. Clearly tensions are running high. One of them, who seems to be kind of in charge of the meeting, Iris, is quite high strung. She has a PowerPoint presentation, 15 slides that she really wants to get through.
No,
the character,
5 slides, 15-minute meeting.
Yes, right. My apologies for inverting that. 5 slides. It should be very painless, you'd think. And we have another character, Pete, who's just wearing like a white t-shirt. He's about to leave on his destination bachelor party a week before his destination wedding. And he clearly doesn't want to be there, but he was the one, as we will find out, who called the cops the night before when they were robbed. And there was a robbery in the office building. He was the only one there, as he says. And he called the cops, so he needs to be in this meeting to tell what he saw.
Yes.
And then we also have Shelley, the third character, who was the interim office manager while Iris was away for I don't remember if they specifically. It was supposed to be 4 months, but she didn't wind up doing the entire time. But yes, Iris was on leave, so Shelley was this interim office manager who is partly responsible for the robbery because of just all the coordination and everything's been a mess. So
and her contract expires next week.
Yes, important details. We have these 3 characters in a room trying to get in touch with all of these people from all around the world to inform them of the very specific details of this robbery, which, to not get into spoilers, turns out to be a lot bigger deal than what it initially seems at first glance. And I feel like that's probably where we could cap a non-spoiler description, if that sounds interesting to you, especially based on all the comedy and nuanced commentary and deeper sentiments that we already addressed. I would highly encourage people to check the show out.
Yes, agreed. Well said. That was just like our Nicholas Nickleby summaries, right?
Yes.
Perfectly succinct.
Do you want to talk about the cast and production highlights before we go into spoiler zone?
Let's do that. So, I mean, this cast was wonderful. You could tell they've worked together on this before, because this is a remount from Fringe. So you could just tell that they had a good synergy with each other. They knew how to bounce and react to one another and get on each other's lines really well. Like, you could tell that there was a great chemistry, and a great knowing of these. They created a way of, how do I say this? They created a way of of creating these characters who knew each other and how to push each other's buttons. Like, Pete and Iris are always butting the heads and are just like kind of like siblings in the way that they just kind of, they know how to push just that right button to make them flare up at each other, you know? And then Shelley is just such a great, I mean, she kind of is, she plays the mom very well, where it's kind of like, no, we're fine, move on. Like, let's just keep moving forward, keep our heads down. Don't rock the boat. Let's just get through this presentation, you know? So that was great. So, I mean, the 3 of them had such fantastic chemistry with one another. And I mean, and also just the way they assembled this great offstage voice cast, who also, I mean, I'm not sure how they did it, where they got everybody in to record at once, or they just went to each of these individual actors like Izad Asmani, Claire Armstrong, Daniel Pageant, Tyrone Savage.
It's Jenny a big Wall. Who's who of well-known Toronto theater folks.
I don't know if they were able to get them all in one space and just do like a recording day, or if they had to go to each of them individually and then somehow magically cut those audio tracks individually, and then the stage manager's up there hitting the Q to Q button, going, and hit this button now, and hit this button now. Because if that's the case, shout out to them for that.
Yes, seriously.
Having to time those reactions or those responses because sometimes they're right on top of each other. Sometimes halfway through one sentence, somebody else is jumping, because as you know, with any teleconference where you can't see each other, it's way more of a headache than a Zoom call, because nobody's lining up right. And there's always some type of confusion there. And I think that's what was great about this, was just the mundane confusion of doing these conference calls is great. Like, I remember back before COVID, when we had the whole sales force of Medieval Times, we would do these monthly sales calls with the 10 other, we have 10 castles. So, and it's like 2 to 3 sales managers per call per castle, because they're different departments. So once again, we did the dial in on the telecom, hit your 9-digit code.
That was along with the French pour service en français.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that totally, and being able to capture that authentically, where it didn't feel forced or somebody up in the booth was just hitting buttons. Like, it felt like there was like just people off stage reading scripts, and their voices were just being piped in through like a microphone sound system, you know? So, I mean, that was just superb. And I mean, I loved how, the set, which was funny, because when you walk in, it's very unassuming. But when the show gets going and you realize, oh, this is a place that's falling apart. It's an old building that they're trying to make work.
Or is it the new building that they've moved into, but it's falling apart because it's
Correct.
been
The new building
of a transition?
Yeah, it's an old new building.
Okay.
Basically, they moved into a new building, but the building is not what they expected. It's older. It's got all these issues.
Yeah. There's a garbage strike.
Upgrade it. There's a garbage strike. But it's like the fact that like the walls are painted that hospital white, and then it's got this random painting
geometric mural,
which is like, oh my goodness, the amount of offices that have those inhuman things that they think make it human or lived in is just so funny to me. Like, it just totally works, and it just totally captures that mundane office environment really well. That like sterilized white with just a hint of, we think this is a human art piece. Here, we'll put this up on the wall to try and make it seem more homey, you know, or try and make it have life in it, that type of thing. So, yeah, I thought the balance of that was done really, really well. But yeah, Ryan, what about you?
I will just kind of agree on all. Yeah, I'll agree on all fronts. Like, obviously, a big highlight of this show is the sound design, and especially like with these conference callers and the voice cast they assembled for them, and of course, once again, shout out to stage management for really controlling like all of that and keeping it like as this whole other sort of fourth character in the play, a fourth character that happens to be a whole bunch of other characters. But also, I will say that special shout out to our onstage cast for playing off of these pre-recorded voices so well, because that can be challenging. Like to have these things that are like pre-recorded, they are fixed, and to make it sound like you're having an organic conversation with them in real time. Like, yeah, the stage management is a huge part of that for timing it perfectly. But the cast on stage really did a good job of selling it, and I think that really deserves special attention. And of course, as you said, they had great chemistry with each other, and it was really, it was very clear what they all thought of each other, what their relationships were. Some things turn out to, have very specific plot elements that hinge on it, which I won't get into details here. But from the very beginning, you got this like palpable sense of that there was tension between all three of them, and having that bubble to the surface as the play went on was, definitely one of the highlights here.
Yeah. And I mean, so sound designer Andy Trahartek, I think is how you say the last name, but we just want to give you a shout out because you were superb crafting that sound design.
Yeah, and who was the stage manager? Let's give them a shout out too.
Aiden Hammond.
Nice. So once again, you are the unsung heroes of this show, and we applaud you for the great work you've done. And like you were saying, you talk about like even pre-COVID, which this show was originally, these conference call, very corporate environments. But I think what I was hinting at earlier, what really, I don't work a 9 to 5, but I've done my fair share of Zoom calls where one person, got on, like there's always someone on mute. There's always, someone sounds like they're in a wind tunnel and they need to leave the call and we're all waiting for them to come back. Like these are I feel like most of us have found ourselves in some kind of situation like this since COVID, whereas we might have not had previously. So it kind of, I feel like this play found its moment post-COVID. Not that absolutely. It wouldn't have been meaningful or interesting or funny prior to COVID, but I think it kind of hits more relatably here as we have all been confined to this idea of remote working, connecting with people all over, and relying on this flawed technology to facilitate it.
Agreed. Well said. Well said. Well said. Well, I'm seeing a voice memo come up from Neil on our corporate caller down there.
Yeah. Before Neil chimes in, just maybe before we go into spoilers, just you want to do like the last reiterate the details of how long the run is going for, where people can.
Of course, yes.
So this is your last chance.
Around to the end because of spoilers, and you want to come back. The show is running from April 28th to May the 8th. So if you're wanting to check it out, go for it. Just go to the Assembly Theatre website, and you can buy your tickets directly through there. And it is a great night out at this little cute hole-in-the-wall Queen Street Theater. So get on out there, check it out.
Something I want to also add is that we'll talk more about this at the very end, but for those who are leaving us now, the show is going on tour. Well, it is going to Brighton in the UK. And we'll say more about that at the end of the video. But for any of our international listeners who happen to be in or around Brighton, who might want to see it there, and if you think what we said sounds intriguing, obviously follow them and make sure to see the production there while it is in New York.
To their ventures as well.
Yes, we have a link for that in the description of this podcast / YouTube video. So help them out, and we'll talk more about that at the very end.
Yes. Perfect. Okay.
Oh, Neil.
Well, yes, Neil. Yes, Neil here. So Neil's giving us the heads up that we're now in spoiler territory. So thanks so much for that little voice note there, Neil. And
we love you, Neil.
We do love Neil. He is a great character.
Yeah, we are Neil stands here.
We are. I want a spin-off of everything that was going on from Neil's perspective.
That would kind of be lovely. It's sort of like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, but just Neil sitting by his phone, tapping his desk, waiting for them to come back on. Yeah. And then now that we are in spoilers, we could talk about him hearing the kind of final blowout that they all thought they were on hold for, and it turns out they were not. And just Neil, like, his jaw dropping, hearing all of this would be delightful.
Michael Ross Albert, write that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern style spin-off play.
We will watch it. We will review it.
We will, absolutely.
It sounds delightful. Perfect. So now that we're in the spoiler zone, I want to talk about the title of this play, The Huns.
Yes, The Huns, which once again, I wouldn't know nothing. Like they sent over an invite saying, hey, do you want to come? Brian and I both looked at our calendar and said, absolutely, we would love to come and see the show. And then I was like, I'm not reading about it at all. I don't want to know what's going to happen. I just want to go in as blind as I possibly could to give me the full authentic experience. And that was a joy for that. So yeah, the title gave me a whole other thing of what is this play? So I don't know, Ryan, like, what are your thoughts on the title?
So, okay. I love the title. I will say that because I think it does what a very good, interesting title does, in that I'm trying to think of like the best way to phrase this, but like it takes a play that could have been called something very different, but by calling it this, it draws the audience's attention to details that it wouldn't have if it was called something else.
Yeah.
Because thematically, what this play, like, to me, this is my interpretation, seems like it's trying to be doing is it's about being civilized. And what does that mean? They kind of refer to the thief who stole the laptops as like these barbarians, invasion, this kind of like horror, the idea of the Huns. We think historically like Attila the Hun, who is never mentioned in here. In fact, to my recollection, the only use of the word Hun to come up in this entire play. Yeah, it's Iris saying to Shelley, okay, Hun, which is a very another interesting connotation here that we'll unpack in a minute. But yeah, there's this kind of like so many lines where they gesture towards this idea of, barbarianism, civilization, invasion, descending into madness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because the play is called The Huns, we as the audience kind of perk up our ears anytime this happens, and yet they don't say Huns in that context. But then when Iris says, okay, Hun, we're like, oh, that's the title. So like,
credits.
Yeah, like even like the kind of line very, very close to the end when it's just Pete and Shelley on stage together, and he says something about Genghis Khan. And Shelley corrects him, like, no, that wasn't him. My boyfriend is an ancient historian.
Yeah.
You expect her to say it wasn't Genghis Khan, it was Attila the Hun. But the fact that she doesn't, your brain is already filling in those gaps. Mm-hmm. And what I kind of like love about this is that thematically speaking, all of that stuff would be there regardless of what they called the play. If they called it like 9 to 5, if that wasn't already a Dolly Parton musical, but you get the idea. Like, but like they could have called it. Conference call, exactly. They could have called it anything, and that underbelly of this, like, what does it mean to be civilized would still be there. Yeah. But I don't think it would be the takeaway that we're kind of like unpacking with this production necessarily if it wasn't for the title drawing explicit yet oblique attention to it. And I think that's that is the master stroke of this title, is that it does precisely that. I have more I could say, but I want to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, I mean, like, once again, like, I went home last night and just looked up what the Huns were, terminology-wise, and they were, historically speaking, they're from the 1370s to the 1469 era of time. They were a nomadic people who lived in Central Asia, Eastern Europe, between the 4th and 6th century, basically. According to European tradition, they were the first reported living east of the Volga River in the areas as part of the Sky Sympathia, right next to Parthia in Arabia. So it's like that whole thing of they are this kind of nomadic tribe, right? Right, exactly. But once again, with the fact that like you have people calling it from all over the world, and they're kind of all these kind of lost voices, these lost.
Okay, I didn't even think of that. But that's
of people that are basically going around and they're trying to, and I mean the Huns, as you said, Attila the Hun was known for the horseback riding along with just being a total pillaging part of history. I mean, the fact that like you have this kind of energy to them where it's just they're going to barrel through. And I mean, you're
remember,
right.
They're the villains of Mulan, the Huns. Let's get down to business to defeat the Huns.
Yes.
Sorry, go on.
Exactly. Ooh, good point. I never thought of that one either. But yeah, that's exactly. I mean, it is this invading force, right? And that is what happened here, where somebody in a bandana and hood broke into the office. We don't know who, to steal the laptops. These 5 laptops, 4 of which had very important data that's ultimately lost because they were stolen, which sets everything
Gen
back.
7 will now be delayed for this vague tech lingo of whatever it is this company does. But
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's even implied that Iris could have been the one in
it's implied.
Anna. I mean, to be honest, because of the way Iris is personified as a character, I wouldn't put it past her.
I wouldn't put it past her.
Self-sabotage like this, and then throw Shelley under the bus like she's trying to do.
Yeah,
because I mean, she's all about dicking these people around, like dicking this company around who screwed her over in her eye. And I mean, she knows how to do it. And as Pete says, how is it that 4 out of the 5 computers were the ones that had the key information that was needed, and they knew exactly where to go. They knew the cameras. They knew the door, that type of thing. Like they kind of had some type of insider knowledge enough to know what was going on. So yeah, once again, like Michael Ross Albert was very good at crafting multiple arguments of you don't know who it could be. It could be, it's kind of like 12 Angry Men in that sense of we're going to lock these people in a room and see how they combust with each other.
Yes. Yeah, like I feel like, I don't know, we'll talk more about Iris in a minute, but I feel like, to me, I like that it was kept ambiguous whether or not, but I kind of read that whole, the implication that maybe she did it as a bit of a red herring. Like it makes sense from Pete and Shelley's perspective why they would jump to suspect that, and like
Iris gives herself away because she says something that they go like, "How do you know that
Pete wasn't there alone?" And we'll talk about that. Don't you worry. But
it's the fact that she does give away certain things where it's like, how would she know that? And it's great that Michael Ross Albert doesn't always answer the question. Yeah, he leaves it open.
Right. I appreciate the ambiguity here, but to me, I was kind of worried, actually, when we first got the hint that maybe Iris did it, and then shortly after they started interrogating her on it,
Yeah.
I was just like, that would be fun and interesting, but it kind of felt like a little too clever by half. And like, I'm glad that we can speculate on it and we could write Stoppardian fan fiction maybe of what that version looked like. But I like that we didn't get like a clear answer on that, and that it seems implausible, just plausible enough that it could be the case, but mostly implausible that it probably isn't, and maybe the story is richer if it's not.
Exactly. And like one more thing I'll say about the title is the whole nomadicness of the title. Shelley is very much the outsider's outsider of this, because she is originally hired as a brief contractor, right? Like she's not meant to be a full-time permanent hire. Ultimately, in the end, she does become that. But like it's the whole thing of even like the character of Shelley, who is an animal prince as well in her costume,
right?
Which is once again very caveman, very kind of predator. Like there's a whole other thing you could read onto it. Is Shelley as innocent or as or as doughy-eyed as she sometimes appears to be, or is there a little bit more of that animal predator, leopard, jaguar energy to her that she is?
Well, yeah, and we can jump ahead
on her opportunity to get the full-time job, so she can good cheese from the grocery store.
Keep buying the good cheese. Yeah, and like I think it's interesting that we kind of we'll talk about more about Shelley in a minute, but like the idea that at the very end we find out that she has a boyfriend, and how that maybe recolors stuff that we thought, maybe
like, why does she sleep with Pete then?
Yeah, exactly. And trust me, we'll unpack that more too.
Oh, we will.
But I think that does kind of play into there is more culpability to all of them that we maybe gave any of them credit for, and we are kind of, I think, invited to share Pete and Roman and everyone else's enamored kind of view of Shelley, because we are like so primed to not like Iris, because she's just so like off-putting as a personality. And she's the one person who doesn't like Shelley, therefore, it does a good job of like kind of communicating to the audience.
In Shelley's favor.
Exactly. A couple of other things about the title before we get too far from that. First of all, Roman, I think, is an interesting name for the CEO, which we kind of hinted at, because I'm not that well read in this period of history. The Roman Empire
was around the same time as the Huns.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say.
Even Wikipedia map, and below the Huns territory is the Roman Empire. So
okay, see, that's because I know like I'm not like an expert in this period of history, and I don't know if there actually was specific clashes between the Huns and the Romans. But what I think
there was,
according to Wikipedia, but regardless of whether there was, Romanness represents Western civilization, and that is what's kind of being. And we talk about the fall of the Roman Empire because they were raided by barbarians, the Goths, and so this idea of, regardless of whether or not there actually was specific historical conflict between Huns and Romans, the idea of Rome equals civilization that was torn apart by barbarian invaders at the end of its long history. It just creates these interesting historical resonances. And I want to kind of unpack this idea of are these characters civilized as they think as they say they are? Because, that's what I think the play's about, and certainly what, in my mind, the title is gesturing towards, because the play that it actually kind of calls to my mind the most is God of Carnage by Yasmin Reza, which also kind of, I personally like this play, The Huns, a lot more than I like that play, which I have decidedly mixed feelings about, but I think we did, and I feel like this play and that play share this kind of commonality of we're acting like we're civilized, but over the 1 or 2 hours traffic of our stage, we are going to reveal that we are either just like babies or possibly barbarians, or not quite as civilized as the facade we put up. And I think this play does a better job of it than that very famous play does, because it kind of really like puts a fine point on the breakdown of these characters that in my mind is more believable than the way it is portrayed.
Well, once again, it's great that these characters already come into the piece with, they're not being their true selves. I mean, Iris right off the bat, because she was so forced in her fake authenticity of, hi everybody, we got this and this and this, like that fake perkiness. You're already right away, your hairs already go up and go, you're being fake.
Mhm.
And Pete comes in already just not wanting to be civilized at all to Iris. So
Yeah.
you're already getting the uncivilized, raw tension between the two of them. And then Shelley is the one that throughout the piece slowly gets peeled like an onion
Yes.
to reveal her true unhappy nature that is driving her. So, but yeah, like that's the thing about these characters is that they already come in. We know they're masking their civility to each other,
Mhm.
particularly when they get on the conference call and they're all. I mean, I love Pete and what's his name?
Oh yeah,
Farber.
I don't think it was, but it was something like, it was a long kind of, basically the dude bro that from the Austin office, that he's like, hey, how's it going? Like, I'm not going to curse on the air here.
Oh,
but
come on, it's PG-13, you get one F-bomb.
I don't need to use it here, but yeah, basically they have a very crude frat bro kind of conversation with each other.
I mean, once again, like that's that nomadic kind of,
it's guys being dudes, as like one would say.
Guys, like F you, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And I think maybe this is a kind of good time, if we're sort of exhausted most of our main thoughts on the title, to sort of go character by character. Because we have like thoughts about all of them. Do you want to start with Iris? Because we've already kind of said a lot about her.
Yes, absolutely. So Iris is a character who I loved to hate throughout this piece. She is very Umbridge to me, like Umbridge from Harry Potter, where she has her little pocket world that she is controlling, and she is doing everything in her power to micromanage it and control it. And I love that because, once again, she was a character who you never quite knew where Iris was standing at any given moment. Like, there it's revealed, or first Pete implies that she was away for 4 months because she was in rehab. Mm-hmm. Then she says, no, I was away because I tried to kill myself with I believe it's sleeping pills. Mm-hmm. And for me, Breanna Dillon, who played Iris, did such a great job creating such ambiguity with the character, where on the surface, the minute somebody says I tried to kill myself, we should all immediately sympathize and connect with her.
And then remember that we still have people on our conference call. Neil here.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, go on.
Exactly. But it's that thing of the minute typically when somebody says I tried to kill myself, the immediate thing to do is sympathize. Mm-hmm. But because Iris has been shown to be someone so full of machinations that she's planned this takedown of Shelley via a telephone call / five-slide presentation.
Yeah.
I kind of go, not that I ever want to downplay someone's attempts to complete suicide, because I definitely don't. However, there is a lack of believability with Iris in the sense of, I can see this type of character being the one who would say something like this, or would spread that other rumor, or would do something to reveal that type of thing to garner sympathy to help her case. Yeah, and that is something where I find that fascinating, because at first, when it was first said, I was like, oh my God, like that's horrible to say. But then the more she unravels herself, I go, I can also see you doing this because we know what you're doing to Shelley. You're pushing her under the bus.
Yeah.
This is just another card you can play of. So once again, it was great. I loved Iris for that character because she was so wound up so tight that you were just waiting for her to explode. And then on top of that, she was such a great, well-written character where, once again, it's ambiguous. Was she the one that broke in to steal the laptops to sink the company? Did she tell another lie about, like, was she in rehab, or was she actually going to see a doctor because of a suicide attempt? That type of thing. It was great. Like, it was such great, like, wonderful ambiguity with the character where you can read it in so many different ways. Because there are people out there who will take advantage of people's sympathies like that to win an argument, to win a situation. And that's what's wonderfully scary about this character, is that they're out there. Like, it's not just always sympathy and things like that you can give someone, because there are people who will use that, like a Hun, like someone who will come in and invade and take over. Because don't forget, she's coming back into the situation, right? She's coming back. She's
the invader, but she feels like Shelley's invaded her turf.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Like, there's a lot of power dynamics here. And Pete is very quick to call her out, going, hold on a minute. You're throwing Shelley under the bus via this very deliberate slide of, what of the mistakes that were made. And it's all Shelley mistakes, but as Shelley reveals, the building is basically crumbling around them. She's doing her best to keep it afloat. But it's that great thing of the controlled chaos of Iris, that she comes in like a whirlwind right off the top and leaves like a tornado whirlwind after she is fired by Roman. Or in the case of the historical accuracy of the Huns, it's like she's evicted from the territory. She is banished away. Right? It's that whole thing. But yeah, Iris is a great character that I'm still trying to process, because I mean, I don't know if Michael Ross Albert intended for us to go, oh no, this is truly what happened to Iris, is that she did have a suicide attempt and she went into care for that, or because it was played so well by Breanna Dillon, that she was so wound up and so Machiavellian and conniving in the sense of the way that she was trying to control and push Shelley under the bus, that it created this seed of doubt in me going, I want to believe you and I do want to sympathize with you, but I also go, you are the person who would do something like this to screw over somebody else to win your day. That's right. Iris is a great character. Anyway, that was a lot of
it's good
dodge I've been throwing at Ryan. So Ryan, feel free to dissect and
it's interesting, because I feel like I had a different interpretation. Well, like I agree that it's ambiguous, and I think Michael was sort of wise to kind of leave these various doors open. And I don't personally care what his intent was. I'm just going to talk about what I, interpreted from it. But I feel like, to me, I believe that the suicide attempt was legitimate.
Yeah,
I believe that maybe she was also addicted to cocaine. Like, I don't know if these things are mutually exclusive. She sort of frames it like, no, I wasn't in rehab because of a cocaine addiction. I was, recovering from a suicide attempt. And yeah, maybe it's one or the other. But to me, the reason why I think that the big reveal is sincere is, well, first of all, I don't think the character Iris is that good an actor. I think Breanna Dillon, the actor, is a brilliant actor for portraying this character, but the way Iris crumbles in the lead up and aftermath of that reveal, and like what it does to her psyche, like if she was like in control, trying to save her job, trying to like put all these dominoes to kind of get Shelley fired, I don't think that's the way you would go about it, having this breakdown that does ultimately lead to her getting fired. So, like, yeah, she's definitely, like, not in control of the situation, even though she goes in thinking she is. And to me, yeah, I see this, all of her, like, it is legitimate trauma, and, like, all of her kind of mental health issues and psychological toll that she's been going through bubbles to the surface here. And, like, I'm inclined to not just believe survivors in the sense, but, like, give the benefit of the doubt that that is what happened to her and what she experienced, and it doesn't justify the actions that she's trying to take here. But I kind of can get it and definitely sympathize with her. Like, I believe her when she says she loves her job. I don't know, that could also be ambiguous too, but like, she's giving it 110%. She's burning the candle.
She likes the power, and Shelley likes threatening her power.
Likes the power, but I also think that she doesn't care. Like, well, she does care because it grates on her that nobody in the office likes her. But she's the kind of person, and like, I don't know, I feel a little seen by this, but she's like, I will work so hard and do the best job, and it doesn't really matter what other people think of me because I get this personal satisfaction from taking pride in my work. And we'll talk more about this as we go on, but for a play that's very much about, alienated labor in the modern workplace, I see her, and I sort of think back to when I worked in like retail, like in a clothing store, and like everyone around.
Retail?
Yeah, it's a Joe job.
I never knew.
And yeah, like everyone around me is just like, oh, this is a job I hated. It's so boring. But I kind of just took pride in doing the best version of that pretty soul-crushing job as you can do. And, you might not make friends and you might not be able to like laugh and have jokes with your coworkers, but like just you're here, you're getting paid. You could be miserable or you can just try to make the most of it. And I see Iris as someone who does that. And but seeing what that does to her, kind of, because she's trying way too hard to be the best version of this thing that, as multiple characters say, kind of doesn't really matter. Why are we wasting our time and energy doing this? the tragedy of Iris is that she can't quite make that mental shift of, wait, this doesn't matter. Why am I killing myself? Literally killing herself in this case to do it. So yeah, I kind of, Iris sort of is my favorite character in this, and like not a person I'd want to have a drink with or be friends with. I feel like there is just something so honest about this portrayal, both in the writing and the acting, of this like, you know, wonderfully dysfunctional, just like horribly sad person who is so invested in the thing that they do for a living that they've kind of lost all sight of the ability to even put that into perspective.
Yeah, once again, that's what I like about this place. The ambiguity allows you and I have two very different perspectives of Iris. I mean, we both love the character, but it's for two separate sides of who this character is. I mean, I enjoy her for her brilliant machinations in her kind of doing the "I will have order," you know, that whole thing of like she is doing her very best to do what she believes will improve the environment that she is in. Yeah. Even though some of it clearly people are not taking her seriously, and it is soul crushing when you hear her talk about how she hates the open concept of the office because she hears all the snickering behind her back, right? And it's the whole thing of that. I totally get it. That is very soul crushing. That is very undercutting you and builds and causes it to fester and boil underneath your insecurities that are sitting there. And I think that's what's great about this character is there are so many ways you can interpret this role. And I mean, if you gave this role to another actress, she could totally read it in a totally different way. She could play Iris even more Machiavellian in her attempts to like I playing that confession as because it is blurted out. It is because Pete keeps pushing her about the cocaine and the rehab, and she finally retorts with, "No, it was a suicide attempt, and that's why I went away." Like it's a blurt out moment where you can play that blurt as any way you want. Is it someone who is calculating that this response will shut everybody up and get her sympathy, or is it that she is genuinely blurting something up because she's being pushed and pushed and pushed to the point, kind of like in 12 Angry Men, where the I forget what jury number it is, but the one who has the son, and you realize that's what's driving him to be so vindictive to this defendant that they're potentially going to execute, is that he's so angry and hurt at his own child that he's lashing out at this other boy who killed his father, right? It's that it's that same energy of you can play. I mean, in 12 Angry Men, it's played very sympathetically, that moment with Lee J. Cobb. But in this, like, once again, it's so great that Michael Ross Albert gave such ambiguity that you can go any which way you want with this. And I mean, and it's great. And once again, Breanna Dillon did such a fantastic job. Threading the needle, that when she exits, I actually want to give her applause when she exits, because that final breakdown moment, Tex ass.
Yes.
Or Sylvie and Juliet in Montreal, we're still here. And it was just great, and just her reactions to certain little voiceover things of, "Leanne, you sound like you're in a wind tunnel, honey." Like,
yes. A couple more things I want to say about Iris before we move on. First of all, like, I agree that the script allows the opportunities for this ambiguity, and I definitely could see a different performer doing it in a way that maybe does lean more into these other elements. I will say what I saw in Breanna's performance is what led me to the conclusion that I came to, wherein I do think, again, intent doesn't really matter here, but I feel like they came together, you know, director, writer, actor, to be like, yes, treat it as if this really did happen, and the, you know, revealing this will destroy you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we saw on stage, regardless of whether or not it could be portrayed a different way, or even if that was what they were going for. Another thing that, because you brought up the, like, she hates the open concept because she can hear people making fun of her, the snickering. Another play that we reviewed quite recently was Gloria at Crows, by Brandon Jacob Jenkins. And like, you didn't see it, I don't believe, right?
I did not see it. No.
But you watched and edited our review of it. So what happens in that play, it's all, the run at Crows is done, so I guess I can spoil it in the spoil section of this episode. But the office misfit in that play shoots everyone.
Yeah.
And one could possibly imagine,
I was waiting for Iris to come back and do something.
Yeah, like, I'm glad she didn't, because that would be a very different play. It quite literally is a very different play called Gloria. But yeah, we can, it's no joke what this kind of adult bullying does to people. Yeah. And like the way that it actually, like, it feels very high school, but like these things don't go away just because you turn 18.
Well, it's tribalism, right? Like in the office, you create your tribes. You have your certain coworkers who who you get along with. You have your people who you don't. I mean, The Office is a great show that explored the tribalism of everybody in that office, right? I mean, there are people like Angela and Dwight who are always a team, and then you have Pam and Jim who are always picking on Dwight, right? And there are times when you sit back and go, yeah, you guys are just dicks.
Yeah, is this just bullying? I get that you're good looking and we're, charming and we're supposed to sympathize with you.
Episode where conflict management, where Michael finds out that Toby has all those files of people who have come and vented to about conflict and they never been resolved, so he tries to resolve them. Mm-hmm. And you find a big file on Andy or Dwight and Jim, where Jim just lists all the different things, like, I put nickels in his phone so it weighed him down. Then the minute I took the nickels out, he kept hitting himself in the face. I moved his desk 2 inches every day. I paid a break to call him by a different name.
Like, he's basically been psychologically torturing his coworker just because he finds him annoying.
Exactly. And I mean, like, once again, like, it's high school, but it's a commentary on some of the darker things that go on, because adult bullying can be scarier than teenage bullying, because teenagers only know kind of one way to go about it. Mm-hmm. Adults have way more things in their arsenal that they can do.
Yeah, and also let's not forget
understanding of emotions and human psychology to kind of know what we can do that will make a hurt that much stronger than just, a simple whisper or "you're not my friend anymore," right? Like, the little things that adults can do to really screw with people's heads is far greater and far scarier.
Yeah. And let's not forget that, we're getting too deep into The Office, so this will be the last point before we move on. Dwight is a heavily armed individual. Like, I kind of
throwing stars, blowing darts.
Yeah, like, he has weapons hidden all over the office. I kind of applaud his emotional stability, that he never goes Gloria on Jim and all the other people in the office that make fun of him. Like, there's kind of an unsung tragedy of Dwight that he just sort of takes it, and then Jim becomes the best man at his wedding for some reason, because I guess the show went on too long. Yeah, the show went on too long. That's not beside the point, but
it's not The Office review. But yeah, once again, it's The Office showing the workplace tribalism that goes on that can alienate someone like an Iris and drive her to be so wound up, so tight that she's always on her back, that it can drive her to not sleep at night. So she takes a lot of sleeping pills, which in turn can cause a suicide attempt, right? Like, it's the whole thing of all these things can build and accumulate, and they can drive someone to become like Iris, who is, you're literally just waiting for the breakdown to happen right away. Like, literally, Breanna Dillon came in almost vibrating as Iris, and she never stopped vibrating until she finally exploded.
One
and
of
her final kind of middle finger hand up as she left. She didn't actually give the middle finger, even though I wish she had. That would have been great. But it's just her final storm out at the end. She's not vibrating anymore. She's triumphantly leaving the space.
That she's free. Like, she's been fired. She kind of is liberated from this experience that, as much as she took pride in it, clearly wasn't good for her. Yeah, and exactly. There is this kind of positive outcome. I'm glad she doesn't come back in with a gun, and that's how the play ends, because I can envision.
Come back in and kill Shelley at the end, because Shelley's like in the office. I was like, is Iris going to come back in and do something?
Well, yeah, like, and like, that wouldn't even be like such like a, oh my god, so unbelievable thing, because that kind of thing happens, and like and that's the thing. Like, I kind of respect that I can envision a happier future for Iris after the play ends, and I like that, and then that's kind of the better note I want to leave her on than Iris's revenge. Mwahaha, gun violence is very bad. Like,
well, I mean, if Iris stole the laptop, she's already got the perfect revenge, because she's left the company basically going back to square one for their big push project, right? Mm-hmm. So if Iris was one that did steal the laptops, which, I mean, once again, there's evidence given that it could have been her. There's stuff that it wasn't her as well. So leave it, like, once again, ambiguity, fantastic. Mm-hmm. But what about Pete? Because
let's talk about Pete.
because Pete's an interesting character. Ryan, since I started last time, I'll let you start with Pete.
Sure. I find of the three of them, Pete, for me, is the hardest one to pin down. Because on the surface, he seems very simple. He's a dude bro.
He doesn't get a good monologue.
No, he gets a small monologue. Like, all of them get one kind of highlight moment to pontificate on how soul-crushing the life in the workplace is. Mm-hmm. His is the earliest of the three, and it's the shortest of the three, and the least emotionally charged. Which is why I feel like it's the easiest to sort of slide under the radar. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he does have a big, like a medium-sized monologue about how, like, this is what we do every day. It's like, it's not as impactful as I think the other two are. Mm-hmm. But, and like, what are we even doing this for? But like, I find he's interesting because he kind of creates this, like, sort of artificial ticking clock for the plot by, like, he has a plane to catch. Yes. It's not a very high stakes thing. He's going to a destination bachelor party before his destination wedding. Like, it's very much like, okay, there's big fish in the office here. I get that you've had these plans, but like things need to deal with it because you were the one who called the cops. It is kind of important to get your relaying of events here. But then when we see how dysfunctional the meeting is, we kind of can sympathize with him. Like, oh my God, do you even need to be here? Like, just get on the plane. Like, why are you still here? But like, I find he's interesting because, well, to stick with this ticking clock idea for a minute, like, I was kind of, because he's not very likable, let's start with that. And that's obviously Jamie Cavanagh, a very talented actor, not a slight against the acting. I think this is an unlikable character by design. But because he's not very likable, I couldn't get too invested in the, high stakes ticking clock because you have a plane to catch, so this needs to speed along. I can kind of sympathize with, oh my God, this is so frustrating. And like the having a plane to catch will just make it even more frustrating from his perspective. But like, it didn't like invest me in like, let's move it along for Pete's sake. But what I kind of thought, like, yeah, the energy he brings into this is interesting because of the three on-stage characters, he's the only male. Mm-hmm. And he certainly has these misogynistic tendencies to him that it comes from what I think is implied to be this sort of frat bro culture that he sort of has entrenched himself in, as we see with his phone calls from what's his name from Austin. Well, yeah, he like talks about how there's clearly some kind of like female conflict going on here. Like he feels like he's above this, essentially a cat fight that's happening between his two female coworkers. And he, as we will find out as the play goes on, he has invested interest in Shelley being the one that stays and Iris not. Because we'll talk more about this kind of closer to the end, but Pete and Shelley are, as is revealed later, having an affair. Or at least have slept together. Who knows if it's even an affair. But it's sort of like a Jim and Pam type thing. And let's not forget that Pam was with Roy at the beginning of their courtship. Just no more Office. Yeah. Yes, no more Office references. That's the last one. But yeah, he kind of refers to Shelley as the only person in the office he can talk to, his only friend, the only person who makes this place bearable for him. And very Jim of him. Very Jim. Okay, that's the last Office reference. But yeah, he kind of, he obviously is very much like a white knight defender of Shelley when he sees very clearly through this transparent plan that Iris has put into place to get Shelley fired. Like he's always sticking up for her, and like he's like, she's trying to get Shelley fired, and everybody loves Shelley. I love Shelley. Roman loves Shelley. Nobody loves Iris. Like she should be the one who gets out of here. It's kind of, when we do find out, which I sort of personally saw coming, I don't think that's a ding against the playwriting, but like the affair plot twist didn't really seem like a big surprise to me based on just how much he was going to bat for Shelley. And I'm like, if this was like real life, it could be like, okay, they could just be good friends and he like respects her and he like, doesn't like the foul play that's going on with Iris. But in a play, in like a very meticulously crafted play like this, I'm like, this is going to reveal something. There's more to it. Like, this is just too much information about this point for it to... And that kind of becomes a big part of Pete's characterization, is the fact that he is defending Shelley against Iris, and he's frustrated that he, is being held up, and it's like sort of those two things kind of make up the most of who he is as a person in the small snapshot of his life that we get to see there. He's also this maybe goes into a bit of a costuming note, but he's also the one dressed least corporate. Like, he's wearing a t-shirt because he's about to go to the airport. He got called in. All three of them got called in, but he got called in just to,
before the crack of dawn.
At the crack of dawn, to be in on this meeting, and then he's heading out and leaving. But he kind of also, through his attire, gave me like Stanley Kowalski vibes, and he sort of like kind of does like play into this idea of this like rugged macho-ness that he kind of represents in this largely female space. And I feel like I'm going off in all kinds of different directions. I don't know if anything I've said you want to jump in on.
Sure. So, I mean, Pete is a character who is interesting to me. I mean, once again, we'll get more into the affair plot, because I do feel that undermines his character for me. So we will get more into that. But I will say Pete is a very interesting perspective. I mean, you're of The Office, where part of me feels he puts on the bro energy, particularly because in a space where it is dominated by women, he may feel threatened, and because of that, he is now putting up his machismo defenses to kind of, because clearly Iris and him have a history together, and once again, Jamie Cavanagh and Breanna Dillon play that dynamic really well, where clearly there is a conflicting energy with each other, that they just do not like each other whatsoever, and that is driving this piece almost more than the time clock of him having to go to the airport, which is great. I mean, once again, the time clock thing is very Seinfeldian, with the whole like Chinese restaurant thing, where they got to get out of that restaurant because they got to get to see Plan 9 from Outer Space. It's the worst one of that series, right? I mean, and that was added to that episode because when they wrote the episode, they went, we need a ticking clock to give some type of stakes. And for me, like, that's what Pete was. Pete was the stake of, we got to keep this thing moving. We got to keep this meeting moving because something else is at play here. Because if not, it could be like you remove Pete and his ticking clock from the story, and you just put somebody else from the house, or just take away that element of Pete's story. He then becomes a far less consequential character and becomes just another body in the room who's defending Shelley. But the fact that he is the ticking clock of the piece and is continually driving the story because he wants to get out of the office really does up the ante of the situation. Yeah,
I just feel like that would be a little easier for us to kind of latch onto if he was a more sympathetic and likable or more of an audience avatar character. Okay, interesting. I didn't like him at all, but like, and that's a compliment to the writing.
The affair was revealed. I liked him up until the affair was revealed. Up until then, for me, I was like, no, good on you for defending Shelley. Like, Iris is being, she's trying to push somebody under the bus, and Pete's making very dialogue and said it isn't always Shelley's fault. That hey, like, this office is already falling apart. There's no AC in my office. The garbage strike is causing these problems, and the affair is just a reveal that we'll get into, and I have feelings about it. But I mean, up until that reveal, I was on Pete's side in this, because I was like, no, good on you for standing up for your coworker and calling out injustice, because it would have been very easy for him to be cold and shut up and just sit back and let these two women go at it. So the fact that he was continually trying to step in and defend Shelley, who for the most part was playing very demure and non-confrontational, was taking the different approach to Iris, where Pete was taking the direct approach while Shelley was taking the workaround approach to Iris. Was very interesting to me. And so for up until the reveal of the affair, I was, no, it's okay. Like, I mean, I get Pete's energy. Like I got Pete's whole bro thing there, because I mean, I had people who would come up to my office and trained with me, and then gone back down to their own castles, and we all got on the conference call. It was, oh, hey, Roberta, like, how's it going? Like, how's the track? And it's like, I got that energy, like that type of, he is the guy at the office. He is the Jim of the office, who is very personable and can make the connections around the space he's in very easily, which to someone like Iris, who is the outsider, who is the Dwight of the situation, who is doing everything they can to make the workplace work, but doesn't have the social skills to make that next leap to fit in, it can be very grating and very frustrating and very threatening. And the fact that Pete naturally just is able to hop on a conference call and is able to make friends with everybody. Neil, the guy from Austin, like he's able to kind of gregariously get himself through. Like there was something about that where I went, okay, I get this. I don't think you're a bad guy, but then he has this affair, and I'm like, okay, now I don't like you anymore.
I
now
like,
I'm
okay,
not on your page because you've taken the character and done something. And we'll get into more of my thoughts on that. But it's that whole thing of that really turned the character in a different way for me. Up till then, I was, yeah, this is this. Like, I like him and Iris don't get along, so they're going to push each other's buttons. And him riding her about this, I mean, from what he's heard, it's cocaine. Like, so like he doesn't know about the attempted suicide attempt. So he's going on what the information he has, which is she's a drug addict and she left because of this, and this is, and somebody else is coming in who was more stable. In Shelley, this is this. I mean, I'll be honest, I did have a feeling that there was potentially going to be an affair subplot that was eventually going to show up, and I was hoping it wasn't going to be that, because that made me just go, this is too predictable.
Okay, so you were predicting it, because that I think is interesting, because
I was predicting it, and I was hoping it wasn't the case. I was hoping that there was the decency of this character. We're showing, yeah, he's a dick to Iris, but he also is someone who is a dick to Iris because of their past relationship with each other, not because he's trying to defend the guy, the girl, the person that he is laying with on the side. That
Classy.
He is someone, right? That he is just seeing an injustice here and is being the third voice in the room going, no, this is wrong.
Yeah.
That's what I'm back when I'm like, I think there's more to this. I'm hoping there isn't, but there could be something more.
So I want to talk about that a bit, because to me, the way Pete kind of kept harping on the defending Shelley, again, if this happened in real life, it would be very different than if it happens in a, very manicured, dialogue-driven play. I feel like I was predicting either one of two things. Either he and Shelley are sleeping together, and that is the one we ultimately ended up with. Or if they're not, he has a crush on her. Like, that seemed clear. Like, it was...
I was among the mind of, there could be an affair. I'm hoping it's not the case. Or that they are just two really good office friends who he has been working under Iris, and clearly they are not compatible with each other. And he's found someone who he does like working with, who has a connection to, who he has a good working relationship with, and he's going to go to bat for that, because ultimately, I know I would go to bat for someone who I enjoy working with over someone who I don't enjoy working with. And if somebody's pushing the person who I work with under the bus, I will absolutely kind of weigh in on a positive angle on the scale toward the person I'm working with more than the person who I don't.
See, yeah, like I say, I can understand in the real world that'd be a case, but in the play, I felt just the way that he kept harping on it, really, like, if they weren't already doing something together, I felt like he certainly wanted to be. And the fact that the one thing we know about him from the outset is he's getting married in a week. That, like, I felt like there was something inappropriate going on, if not actually going on, possibly going on in his mind or desires. And, like, and so I had my porcupine quills up to not trust Pete from the start, and I was vindicated for those urges. And one of the very last things he says in the play is that he's the one who's been stealing Iris's almond milk, and he just doesn't he doesn't give a crap about any of that. He'll eat anything. It was like, you are not a good coworker. You are bad at cohabitating. He is
the Jim of the Office.
But no, I would argue one more Office reference. He is Ryan from The Office, who thinks he's Jim.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, because he's just like an unpleasant, dickhole of a person, but thinks that he's like, oh, but I'm the charming one. I'm the one who's, having an affair with the other nice, down-to-earth person in this office. I, taunt the kind of person who I think is not nice in the office. Like, he's basically just Ryan from The Office, but if Ryan thought he was Jim, which he kind of basically does. He thinks he's the protagonist of the story, even though he's just awful.
Interesting. I never thought about that. Ryan is Jim. But yeah, I'm like, the whole reveal at the end of, I think I was the one that was stealing her almond milk.
Yeah.
Which is a great line. Like, once again, it's a great bit of funny last minute reveal. But yet then he also has this moment of, yeah, but that couldn't cause her to have a breakdown, right? Like that couldn't be I couldn't have, there's a bit of a realization moment of, am I partially responsible for
Oh,
driving
he's
this woman
partially
off.
responsible, not just because of the almond milk, but he is definitely one of the ones snickering in this open complex like office.
Yes.
Like, so that's the thing. Like, he is very clearly to blame, and I can understand like him not realizing or not understanding the gravity of what he's doing. But his laughter at the almond milk, I don't see that as like a legitimate, sober, oh my god, am I actually the problem? He's like, it's just more of the dude bro stuff. Like, he's
See,
like,
I read it differently. I read it more sympathetic.
maybe there's like a twinge of the sympathy in there, but then it kind of is immediately undercut by, Shelley has a boyfriend and now I'm on guard because of this. Like,
And for me, like I read that moment of him kind of like, you know how once I'm back to the office, there's the moment where like Jim is listing all the things he's done to Dwight, right, in that conflict resolution episode, and at the end of it, he goes, "Really? Yeah, you know, when you list them all one after the other, it does seem like bullying, but it's not because he deserves it because he's Dwight,
yeah,
right? Like there's that moment of him realizing that, oh, maybe what I'm doing is not as funny when you actually list it out chronologically, not spread out over years of working together." And that's where that laugh for Pete came in at the end, where it's like, oh, because once again, he says, I think I'm the one. Not I am the one. He says, I think I'm the one.
but to me, I read the I think as like a, he puts no thought into what he does. He just carelessly takes whatever he takes. For putting it a little crudely, he takes Shelley because that's like a,
Well, it's like the Huns, right? They invade and they take.
No, well, exactly. It is the Huns of the title, but like, yeah, he has kind of no regard for his own presumably monogamous relationship. He doesn't even care to find out that she's in one too until the end of this play. Like, yeah, he is just a thoughtless, consumptive force who just takes what he pleases and doesn't really think about it and doesn't care about the collateral damage that he like drags in his wake when he does so. He is this kind of just like void of destruction, and maybe this is very like hyperbolic way of putting all of it, but like, yeah, I find him a very hard character to sympathize with, even if he maybe does have these twinges where you can kind of get it, and maybe he does have like a moment of self-reflection near the end before just moving on to something else. But
I will say, like, once the affair is revealed, my sympathy level for him went way down. The scale totally went.
So one of my favorite lines in the play, actually, and it kind of feels like a throwaway line, but it's when it's either, I don't remember if it was shortly before the affair was revealed, but it was clear that it was coming, or if it was right after it was revealed. But Shelley, Pete says like, oh my God, I'm getting married in a week. And Shelley's like, yeah, are you though? And like, it's kind of like they clearly haven't had to talk about this, but like, it's kind of in that line. I share Shelley's exasperation, not because I think they are like they should be together like a Jim and a Pam, but it's kind of just like, dude, what are you even doing? Like,
make up your mind.
Yeah. So like, like I feel like it's that exasperation kind of sums up how I feel about Pete. Like, do you even think about anything you do? It doesn't seem like it. All right, let's talk about Shelley.
Yes, Shelley, our final character. So, Shelley, I mean, played by Cass Van Wyck. She's the character who right away you're the one who she set up to be the one you have the most sympathy for, because it's the whole thing of Iris comes in like the whirlwind, Pete's coming in aggressive right off the top of, I gotta get to the airport, I don't want to be here, and Iris is the one, Shelley is the one that is just trying to keep the peace and get through this meeting and move forward. And so for me, I found it a very interesting arc. And the more I sat with her, and once you brought up the whole concept of the Huns and the invasion, in our title discussion, I'm more coming away going, is Shelley as innocent, or is she more, once again, the wolf in the sheep's clothing who is wanting to keep her job? And because she's wearing the leopard print.
Yeah, she's wearing leopard's clothing, which is interesting.
It's a predator, and she wears that dress under like a very mundane gray jacket. So once again,
predator under the sheep's clothing. Yes. Okay, clever
and then
costume
on top
design.
of that, she puts the jacket back on at the end when she goes to talk to Roman. When she sits back down for that call with Roman, she's put back on her jacket. And the fact that she takes her jacket off at one point and really starts to reveal the pain and the suffering that she is going through of, I think about the people who throw themselves in front of the trains or the streetcars and cause and how easy that would be. And I mean, I took the GO train for 2 years, and there are days where you would sit there and go, yeah, that light is coming at the end of the day. Like,
Also,
like,
I'm going to stop you right there and say we will put links to mental health services in the
yes,
description of this one,
yes,
because obviously suicide is no joke, and
no.
we take it very
And I'm
seriously.
being very
here at
honest
Cup of
about
Hemlock.
there are
Yes.
days where I was those train tracks and thought things, like that is something that is very real. And her monologue about, yeah, I hit my snooze button just a little bit longer every day, and just that made me think about how many alarms do I have to set up every day to get out of bed, like a job is a job, and yes, it pays your rent, and yes, it
pays for the expensive cheese.
Pays for the expensive cheese, but or just allows you the lifestyle where you're not a step away from poverty, And I mean, it's that thing of, is this a job she wants? No, she goes, this was just supposed to be an administrative job, not me putting out literal fires in the building, And then that's the thing there where it's like, yeah, you take a job because, you take it because you got to, not because you want to. There are days where I sit at my desk and go, is this what I want to do with my life? Is there something, should I be actively searching for something more? Or am I okay with the complacency because, hey, my job is 20 minutes away from my house. I can walk to work. Hey, it gets me through. I get to pay my bills. I like the people I work with. So am I okay with settling for something like this because it's easier than trying to get out there and find something new and rock the boat.
Yeah.
And make a leap, So I find Shelley she's the most human, relatable character of this piece because there's a humanity about her that you go, that you just go, yeah, I get you. I get your struggle, and I get where you're going with this. And so, like that's where I got. But then at the end, like once again, thinking about the costume choice for her and the jacket makes me go, is she more like an Iris who is calculating?
Yeah, she's better at being Iris than Iris is, basically.
Yes, exactly. Because once again, she's able to thread the needle. She's able to put out the fires in the office while at the same time being personable enough to make the connections with people. And I mean, she knows Pete's engaged, but she chooses to have an affair with him while she's also in her own relationship. So is that because there was a lust, or was it because that she felt that this was a good calculation to get somebody on her side that has a good, strong voice within the company? Because clearly Roman and Pete have a good relationship that they talk about.
That's the thing. I don't think they do, actually, because there's a line where, like, it was in one of the moments when Pete was like, everybody loves Shelley, Roman loves Shelley, and Iris is like, how do you know? Did he tell you that? And he's like, yeah, because I talk to the CEO of the company all the time, like, sarcastically. Like, I don't think he actually is all that.
Literally.
You took that literally? Okay, I thought the sarcastic tone was
Roman
palpable.
And Pete, just like how Roman is bros with the guy from Texas, that Roman, because once again, Roman's the guy that married his secretary. There is a level of camaraderie there of...
He's a dude bro also, probably.
Probably. There's some dude bro energy between the two of them that can... And once again, that would piss Iris off. Because, I mean, she's the one that's trying to keep the company running, and yet the guy who's dude broing with the CEO is able to make that connection better than she can. And that's... feel that ongoing frustration between the two of them. So
I like that reading a lot. I would maybe just as a note, and this might be more for acting than for writing, but just say if you were to do another iteration of this, then maybe I would make it definitively not sarcastic, that line, because I feel like it would invite that reading that you're putting forward better, and I think that would grate on Iris more and maybe develop Pete in like a different, interesting way.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and once again, Shelley, I don't know if she coming out of the end, thinking about her character more is, I do think she has a lot of mental health struggles. I do absolutely believe her, like compared to Iris's monologue, where at times I wasn't always believing her in the sense of, is she saying this because it's honest, or is she saying to try and garner sympathy, and she's using this as a tactic? Shelley's monologue, I believed, I connected with, and went, I do believe that this is your internal thoughts about working in a job like this. Or about the 9 to 5 experience. And for me, on one hand, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly. But then I also go, hold on a minute, though. Is she saying, is she saying that, but also at the same time, smart enough to know the game to make a simple contract position become a permanent full-time position? Because there's part of her that likes the stability of this workplace. That she's someone who has garnered such respect and power within this company that the CEO likes her, that this head honcho guy, Pete, likes her. Everybody on the conference call seems to like Shelley. That she kind of goes, that she gets that's a little bit of a power trip in the moment.
Yeah, a little dopamine.
I've done something Iris can't do. I have bridged the gap of, I put the fires in the office, but I also have garnered the personnel power behind me that I can take the system when I want it. That type of thing. And at the end, it's a very interesting dynamic. Once again, the ambiguity of this play is what makes it such a great piece of work, because you come away with so many different thoughts going through the head, So yeah, Brian, I just spewed a lot at
you. This whole episode has just been us spewing stuff at each other. So Shelley, I think, is interesting. For a lot of reasons, and a lot of them you've already gotten into. Because I think we are invited to see her as this kind of audience POV character more than either of the other two. And when she does monologue about, her existential crisis about, what is she even doing here? I feel like, to me, again, intent doesn't really matter, but I feel like that seems like the kind of author surrogate. If you take one thing from this play, let it be this monologue kind of thing. And more so than I think that either of its counterparts from Iris or Pete, when they both have their little monologues too. I feel like Shelley's is the one that's like, hey, maybe there's a problem with capitalism that we should be doing something about. Because that's the thing. She's sort of fighting to keep this job, as you've kind of unpacked a bit. But this job unlike Iris, she doesn't love what she does. She doesn't get personal satisfaction from it. And yet you need to work. You need to have a job. You need to kind of, if you want to keep buying the fancy cheese and be accustomed to your life and take Ubers, to not have to go into the subway, you do kind of have to keep working. And that's sort of a flaw with the system that we've created. We probably will talk about this a little more near the end, but we've through economic coercion, we find ourselves in this situation where we have to do things we hate in soul-crushing environments. Because, what's the alternative? I guess there's none. So, I feel like Shelley really just is voicing this kind of big billboard thematic message of what exactly is the problem here in ways that are more generalist than someone like Iris who has very specific mental health issues. And Shelley starts her monologue kind of framing it also like, I too struggle with mental health.
Yes, because it comes after Iris's confession.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting,
that's a connection piece.
Yeah, and what I think is kind of interesting is you very, very honestly here, and I appreciate your forthrightness when you talk about you also having similar thoughts, standing on a train platform. And I'd be lying if I said that I hadn't either. And it makes me think of, there's a line from the brilliant Canadian Stratford parodying TV series Slings and Arrows, where Paul Gross's character Jeffrey is in a drunk tank for the night, and the cops ask him before they release, have you ever had suicidal ideation? And he just looks at them and said, hasn't everyone? Or doesn't everyone? The system has been designed in a way where there's very little escape, or only maybe the very privileged few can have an escape. But if you want to retain the privilege that you have, maybe that's not an option. And, a lot of problems here, obviously. And Shelley is kind of giving voice to this in a way that starts as I too share your issues with mental health. But as she kind of talks more about it, it doesn't necessarily seem like it's a diagnostic or even individualized, thing that she's talking about. It's kind of just this is what the modern workplace will do to you, finding yourselves in these positions of a job where she even says, and I love the line where I don't even know what this company does or what we do. But that's the thing, for her job to just be the one who gives ice cream sandwiches to people stuck in elevators and coordinate a dumpster to take away the garbage. She doesn't really, she is so alienated from the actual what even Gen 7 is. And we, the audience, never find out, is it a new cell phone? Is it it doesn't matter. It's some tech jargon mumbo jumbo. We don't care. But and we are like Shelley, we don't need to know in order to invest ourselves in what's actually happening here.
Yes.
And yeah, I think to me, maybe this is kind of a good point to get into the affair plot twist, because I think, that definitely is what colors my view of Shelley.
Yes.
In a way, because every time that Pete goes to bat for her, she has her kind of holstered answer like, it's just a short-term contract. I'm only here for like another couple weeks or however long she says.
Stop defending me.
Yeah. Because she, unlike Iris, she doesn't stake her identity on being here.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of read her negating Pete's defenses here is her kind of being like, Pete, I get it. Remember, they have a secret that they're sharing this whole time. That she's just like, Pete, stop defending me. One, because everyone in the audience is probably speculating at why you're doing it. The audience being everyone in the conference call, but also metatheatrically the audience of us watching the play. And Iris also being part of this audience that they're performing for. And two, I'm not as invested in me being here as you are. Because, if you feel like it's very important that I stay here so you can have a fudge buddy in the office, not using my one swear prematurely. But yeah, so you can just have, a friend with benefit who kind of helps pass the time, regardless of whether or not it's always because they're sleeping together or just because they enjoy each other's company. She's just like, I'm not really that invested in whatever this is as you are. I will move on and get another job and be fine, or be just as miserable there. But your camaraderie isn't enough to make me want to stay.
Yeah.
And to hell with Pete. Like, I don't like him very much. So I think that's sort of an interesting undercurrent with which we can, unpack her character a little bit, because she's happy to stay there. And at the end, she kind of puts her sheep's clothing back on and gets on the call with Roman and probably will stay. And that's kind of, I think, I talked before about the tragedy of Iris. The tragedy of Shelley is that she has this very lucid realization about, I am so miserable here. Why am I doing this to myself? And yet ends the play presumably committing to a longer term investment into it. And that, to have that realization, but then, you got to work. So this place is as good as any. Like, is it as good as any? Would you be happier maybe working at McDonald's? Like, you wouldn't get paid as much. You couldn't buy the expensive cheese, but maybe there's something else for you that isn't and you do have to work somewhere. Like, we live in a system where that's non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. But I kind of think that coming to that realization and not taking some kind of action against it, whether personal or sort of large scale, perhaps even more revolutionary against it, is the kind of spiral that she ends the play in, which is interesting to me. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so I guess now I can give my thoughts on the affair plot. So
yes, let's talk about the affair plot, because we've been circling around it so much.
Yes.
It's honestly, it's funny because it's not necessarily this huge thing in the play, yet the kind of build up to it and reveal of it, I think, makes it feel bigger than it is. So let's unpack a little bit.
So I'll say right off the top, this was the one element of the piece that I wasn't the biggest fan of. This was something where I felt it was unnecessary. Like, this felt like an unnecessary piece of the plot that can be removed, and it gives the play even more ambiguity. That you can read it as, are they doing something in the back room together? Or are Pete and Shelley just good coworkers to one another? Like, being so direct about they're having an affair, that's where I felt a little Degrassi PSA high schooly. Like, we got to reveal this plot point. I enjoyed throughout the piece up till then that you didn't quite know where this relationship was. That, were they just friends? Were they more? Did Pete want it to be more? Like, that, the openness of that is something I really enjoyed. And the minute that the affair was revealed, it immediately, in my view, it vilified their partnership and made it really now become a team up against Iris, because Pete likes being with Shelley and having his, as you said, fudge buddy of the office. And Shelley, it puts Shelley's genuineness in question for me, because, as we've alluded to, she has this kind of or a wolf in sheep's clothing routine of the coat, and the whole thing of, is she doing it because she wants to secure her job? Because clearly she knows that he's engaged and she has a partner of her own. So she actively, like, she is not the doe-eyed person that Pete took advantage of. She was just as complicit in cheating on her own partner to sleep with Pete. So what does that say for them? It creates this duplicity in them that I didn't need. I enjoyed the depiction of, once again, there's that great Harry and Sally dynamic of, can men and women
she's
be
having
friends? Right?
Not
Yeah,
that
and also just the classic argument of, can men and women be friends without there being a sexual component
yes
to it? And by giving this piece the affair subplot, vilifies these two people and undercuts something that was really kind of nice about this piece of, you had Pete standing up for a coworker who he liked and was standing up against something that does happen in the office, where someone of a power position does push somebody else under the bus to gain a foothold in a situation. That does happen. So it's the fact that, like, this affair I felt was unnecessary. I didn't feel it was a necessary plot element to this piece. It didn't. It didn't enrich the piece as I think it could, as something else, as another reveal could have been. Like the fact that you and I both in the back of our heads picked up on it immediately.
Yeah,
for me, kind of goes, then it's missing its goal. Like, if you're gonna do the affair reveal, let it be a bigger reveal. Let it be a true, genuine surprise versus us right off the bat going, those two. You know,
right.
like, because that thing of, if you're going to do it, I would love more ambiguity, because this piece is so great already with ambiguity, that something that is so flashing red light that you picked up on it right away. And I, in the back of my head, was hoping that it wasn't going to be the case. I was actively hoping that, no, don't let them have this affair. Don't let them have this sexual component to them. Let them just be friends. Let them just be comrades of the office, which, once again, that dynamic alone can piss Iris off. Because she's someone who says, I don't get these personal connections. But yet, the person who's come into the office is making those personal connections and is making friends in the office. And it's threatening to Iris. That threat alone is enough to drive someone to have a breakdown. Having them have an affair is like, okay, all right, we're going that route, you know? So I don't know. Once again, a lot of things thrown at Ryan. Feel free to dissect.
Okay, so a few things. So first of all, I'll say, yes, I saw it coming kind of right away. And like, I wouldn't have been surprised if there was some kind of clever subversion of it, but I don't think the fact that I saw it coming is necessarily, I'm not treating that as a ding against the playwriting or the directing. Like, because I kind of feel like, sure, some people might have been like completely thrown off by like, what, how did that, oh, I had no idea. Wow, that changes everything. But I kind of feel like it creates this element of surprise, not in like the, you know, or it's not even surprise. I'm trying to find my words here, but like it's creating this element where the audience has probably been suspecting it. Everyone in the audience probably had some hint or speculation of it, waiting to see if that gets confirmed. And while it perhaps might have been more of a clever subversion, if no, that actually isn't the case, I feel like it almost, I'm happy with like this, and I think it kind of works well for what the play is doing. Because yeah, like the moment it is revealed, it's kind of, you get this sort of personal satisfaction of the audience of like, yep, they weren't hiding it very well. It's kind of like, you know, mystery stories, how you kind of, you know, there's the kind of, you know, very well-trod critique of BBC Sherlock now, how it doesn't actually give clues to the audience because it wants us to be enamored that, wow, this brilliant detective solved it. And I would have never seen that coming, is because, yeah, you weren't given the information to see it. Because it's not really about the personal satisfaction of a mystery story, is trying to solve it, which is what we, the audience, get our satisfaction from. So, like, yeah, I think the fact that they seeded the clues maybe a little too heavy-handedly, but you do get the satisfaction of, I knew it, like when it is revealed. Now, to your point, which I think is a very fair point, which is that it is playing into this trope of men and women, or heterosexual men and women, can't be friends without eventually canoodling or having some kind of, you know, romantic and or sexual tension there. And I think that is, I'm not saying the play is toxic for leaning into this, but I do think that is a toxic mentality that I do hope we can kind of move away from. Mm-hmm. But and yeah, it certainly isn't necessarily the case, but I think as far as this play is concerned, it is doing by having this element in there, it creates one, just more dramatic stakes and tension for what's actually going on here. And the fact that Pete and Shelley very clearly feel differently about what they're doing with each other is what creates like what I think that's the subversion that we eventually get. Is like, it's not like, it doesn't end with good, Iris is fired, now we can be together. It's basically just Shelley being like, yeah, no, fuck off, Pete. There, I used my one. I was saving it. But yeah, it's very much, that these are two people who just due to these alienating circumstances of the workplace have just found some kind of, solace or pleasure in just each other's company in this like very visceral way. But that it kind of, what I think is interesting about it is it certainly means different things to both of them, but it's not necessarily meaningful. This clearly, neither one of them thinks they're in love, which is what I think is kind of like Shelley very clearly doesn't, because she's basically the end sort of reels that like, this is just a thing to pass the time. I don't care about you at all. Go get married, you doofus. Like, and for Pete, it's kind of just more of that same mentality that I talked about earlier of, yeah, just take the almond milk. I don't care. Like he's just like, yeah, I'm a good looking guy in this office. Here's a good looking lady. If we get along, of course we're going to sleep together. Like, oh, right, I am getting married. Whoops. And like, I think this kind of really becomes clear in his reaction to finding out she has a boyfriend, because the way he does it, it's not like, oh my God, you do. I thought we had something special. It's like, oh crap, I'm not the center of your universe. Is like kind of the way that his sort of lines reveal there. Is he doesn't like, have resistance to it. He understands that, this probably wasn't going to ever be a serious relationship. Like, although, and another kind of interesting thing about this sort of toxic bro culture that I think this play is commenting on is, let's not forget that Roman, who Pete may or may not be on friendly terms with, we're not 100% sure about that, but he married his secretary. And TV shows like The Office, once again, for example, create these kind of weird ideas that two people can't work together, like you sort of talked about, without that, like basically every romantic relationship in your life will spin out from being in this space with these people that you work with. Like almost every single character on The Office winds up in some kind of romantic relationship with someone else that they work with.
Dwight even and Angela.
Yeah, but even Phyllis, like who marries Bob
Vance.
Yeah, like he's not part of Dunder Mifflin, the company, but she only knows him because they work in the same building. Like it's kind of like, I think that's sort of the toxic thing that we should move away from, this kind of implication that not just that two people can't be friends in the office without eventually sleeping together, but that you have to intertwine your personal romantic life with your office life, because, well, where else are you going to meet people? Like, and it's like, I think that's, so when we have Pete realizing that, oh, right, what turned out, what I thought was a little more special is actually just like a, whatever the thing for you. He's just like, oh, right. This isn't necessarily going to be like Jim and Pam or a Roman and Leanne kind of situation. Like, cool. Okay. Nail in the coffin. I'm going to get on that plane now. And I think that is the, they're both shitty people, assuming that these are monogamous relationships that they're in, and we don't necessarily know one way or the other. I think we're led to assume that they are, but yeah, like they're both very bad for doing this thing, but if they are indeed monogamous, but it's, it's that kind of sting at the end that, this doesn't kind of result in some sort of happy ending for one or both of them is, I think, where the subversion eventually comes in. And to your point about like, ooh, this would have been better without this element, I'm struggling to think about what would have been the climax, if not that. And just the fact that I wasn't surprised by it doesn't make it any less climactic. But I kind of think there still needed to be something. If you didn't want them to have an affair, what would be this kind of like big sort of dramatic beat close to the end?
I don't think you need one. I think the Iris meltdown and just her getting so frustrated at the sense of, or even her challenging them, going, "You're having an affair." "No, we're not." And her just going, "So then you're just friends." "Oh," and her just spinning that damn this woman. I have given 110% of my life to this office, and yet I have never gotten what she got, which is she not only won the people in the office over, but she also was doing a good job of putting out the fires, getting people out of the elevators, giving them ice cream sandwiches. Like, damn this woman.
Yeah.
Like that alone, I think, is enough to drive her to that final breaking point. You don't. I think you can take that affair out and just go, no, we're just friends. And turns out we actually can like each other in the office, and that's enough to give Iris her thing of, God, fudge, damn it, son of a goat. Like,
I guess what I take issue. Like, I like that, and I think
like that would be my thing. Like, I don't think you need that last push, because by simply saying, Iris, you failed because you didn't get the final thing of creating personal dynamics within the office. That's enough to drive anybody who has strived so long to be. I mean, it's kind of like when, going back to The Office, when Dwight finds out Jim got the co-manager position over him, and he has that great, it's a great gif as well, just him yelling, right? Like him just yelling because he goes, what else can I do? I'm top sales guy. I take care of this office. I really have weapons strategically placed around the office to defend the office. Like, what more can I do for this company to get the recognition that I deserve? So, and that, I think that's enough to, and that's enough to push the ending of the piece, is that Iris having this full-on breakdown because she realizes, I can't win. I cannot win. And by not winning, it's throw it to the wind. Fine. I don't win. This company sucks. Tech's ass.
If I may, I like what you're saying here, and I think agreed that Iris's arc could benefit just fine without this affair. What I think removing the affair would then do is very much protagonize Iris, like make her the main character, because what the affair adds to it by creating the secret, this tension, specifically with Pete and Shelley, is that it balances the playing field a bit. That there is no one main character, that they're all struggling with things, and their monologues certainly reveal this. And that we kind of have this interesting moment with Shelley and Pete at the end. Kind of, I don't think that could happen if it's just like, yep, we were good friends. Oh, good thing she's gone. Like, I feel like we would still have that big kind of interesting, it would work very well for Iris's story. But what I love about this play is that it's not just Iris's story, it's all three of their stories. And they all have these. What
I would do there to bounce off you is take the affair out, and then at the end, have that final opportunity to, and imply that, oh, maybe Pete does want something more. And Shelley doing I have a boyfriend.
Right. Yeah.
and that's enough there to kind of go, because once again, take it out, but leave the ambiguity of, are they sleeping together? Are they not sleeping together? And Pete revealing at the end of, maybe I do want something more. And Shelley just going, no. So we are not doing this. This is not what I'm wanting. I have a boyfriend. Go on your bachelor party.
So I've used, why I would maybe take issue with that as like a not quite resolving the problem I am articulating here is that I've used the word tragedy a lot talking about this play, and it's not what I expected going into this episode, obviously, because it's more of a dark comedy than anything, but tragedy requires, or at least in the classical Greek sense, a point of no return has already been crossed. Like, it's not the story of watching Oedipus make the mistake where he will sleep with his mother. He already has done that. Yes. And the play is just watching the aftermath of that and his revelation that I have already made the mistake. There's literally nothing I can do that will change what I've already done. So, well, yeah, exactly. And to me, the fact that they have already slept together, in fact, they are responsible for the robbery because they, were not watching.
They were watching the door.
Yeah. So and that's an interesting element that we have yet to talk about. But
that's true.
But specifically, the fact that this has already happened. If it had just ended with Pete being like, "Oh, by the way, glad Iris is gone. I've always had a crush on you," and she's just like, "I have a boyfriend. Go away." It's just okay, that's just her shooting him down, rightly so. She doesn't owe him anything just because they were friends, and he's gonna get married. In fact, she doesn't even have to say, "I have a boyfriend," you're getting married, buzz off. This can't happen, no thank you. But the fact that they already have just adds so much more layers and texture and depth to their character. We don't have to like them or agree with them or sympathize with them. They're Huns. They're bad people. They take what they want. They invade these spaces. And I think that's okay. So, like, that's, I guess, I know we've been talking about this for a while. Like, I'm happy to leave my thoughts there. I don't know if you have anything.
For me, like, I just go, it's an element of the piece. Do I love it? No, but I also get why it's there. So, and I think we created valid arguments on both sides of the spectrum where it's like, it works because of this, and mine going, it doesn't work because of this. And I think that's the joy of it. Once again, ambiguity. It's a piece where you can parse out a certain element like we have. And because we keep going around and around and around dramaturgically trying to figure this one out. But let's get into the final topic.
Yeah, like if I could just speak to Michael directly, because you're probably watching this. You said you liked us diving deep. Well, here you have it. Like,
sure, we're diving deep.
This is us. And hats off to you for writing something that invites so much spirited debate and conversation.
Yes. All right. Final topic, which is the honesty this piece brings to the 9-to-5 life.
Mm-hmm. You probably have more to say about this than I do, so I'll let you kind of take the lead here.
So this piece, the big thing I took away is just how well Michael Ross Albert brought about the honesty of the mundane. That a majority of the audience who will see this piece probably does work some type of 9-to-5 job to pay the bills. And the fact that it's a piece that says we all feel this way. Like as you and I have both camaraderie about having the tough days and you're standing on the train track waiting for the train to come and thoughts come through your brain. And it's that thing of it's the piece of going, we've all been there, we've all felt it, we all feel the Shelley thing of, I want to get out of this job, but hey, it's allowing me to live the life I want to live. And it's it brings into question of, should we accept this? And I think the play does give kind of an answer at the end of, whether right or wrong, we will accept it, because what's the alternative? You end up like Shelley's boyfriend, who, sure, he's doing the thing he loves the most, which is ancient history, but as she says, very low employment.
Yes, no job prospects.
Sad, because once again, it's a thing of, you may have the passion and the desire to do something different. I would love to have a life where I fantasize about writing my ultimate 10-season Netflix show all about the Kennedy family.
Mm-hmm. And I would like that for you one day.
Thank you. I'm putting it into the universe. But it's that thing of, I have the desires, or to do I don't know, like on lunch yesterday, I literally wrote out how many 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different Batman films you could do. Right? Like, it's the thing of, you have
Warner Brothers, call them up, get these ideas.
Call me up. But it's a thing of, you have these passions and desires to do something, and you either can take the leap and end up like Shelley's boyfriend and basically be dependent on her to do the 9-to-5 job to pay for his passion of ancient history, because we don't know what he does, but assuming that he's not off somewhere being an archaeologist exploring history, or he's not a professor somewhere, we don't know what he does.
Yeah, her wry complaint about the not very good job prospects kind of implies, much like Cass's character in the other play 2 Minutes to Midnight, she's subsidizing her partner's passions here. Yes. Exactly.
And that's the thing, right? Where this play is very much putting the choice on the table of, you either can be like a Shelley and life sucks sometimes and you got to put out the fires and it's not everything you dreamed it to be, but it's allowing you to live your life. Mm-hmm. And if you are able to invest a little bit of money for a retirement one day, then great, because then maybe at the end of your work life, you can finally get in there and do something at the end when the time comes. But you either end up like Shelley, or you are like her boyfriend, who has doing his passion of ancient history, but what is that really giving him besides low employment opportunities?
But
and I think that's what I like about this place. Michael gives a really good analysis and really verbalizes the internal monologue we all have about being in this environment. That sometimes people take jobs. I mean, my parents even said, Mac, just during COVID, when it wasn't clear if I was going to go back to the castle, and they're like, find a new job, take any job. And for me, I pushed back and I said, I don't want to take any job. I don't want to be out selling vacuum cleaners door to door, even though I'm sure I could probably do that, no problem. But there's no joy, there's no passion. I mean, the one thing I do like about my job is that I get to work in a theater full time. Would I rather be writing the scripts for the show? Absolutely. Versus landscaping. Sure, absolutely. But at least I have my foot in the door somewhere that I enjoy the people I work with, and it is a fantastic company in the sense that I get to be around a great theatrical experience that people come away with having a really great moment. Like this week alone, I was very happy to work with a family whose 9-year-old son just beat stage 4 cancer, so they're doing a big celebration at the castle.
That's great.
So shout out to that family and to that little boy for beating this, and the fact that I get to work with them and I get to craft their event. That was a lot of fun to me. I actually got a lot of kick out of that. And I'm happy to be there versus being like Shelley, who goes, I don't even know what we do here. It's about finding the life you can live. Because if you want the good cheese and to take the Uber home versus the subway, you have to make sacrifice on the other end of the spectrum. Because very rarely do our passions and our employment line up the exact way we want it, unless you're someone who envisioned yourself from day one, I don't know, running a tech company, then sure, maybe you can win that dream. But a lot of us come out of school going, I would love to do this, but I'm doing this because it pays my bill.
Yeah.
So I think that's what Michael's piece really brought up for me, is the honesty of the 9 to 5. We may all hate it, but it affords us to survive in this life we live. So Brian, feel free to
I'm glad you started this one, because you, like, as you said, actually do have a 9 to 5 job. And if we're gonna position this as like a binary dialectic between, the 9 to 5 job you probably hate because it pays the bills and following your passion with little job prospects, I'm definitely on the other side, because I, like our ancient historian who is unnamed in the play, I'm in grad school right now. I'm doing theater history, and thankfully, I am, subsidized by a very good scholarship and TA job, but I know that won't last forever. And once I do graduate, I expect to, much like our offstage character, have very little job prospects. So, but I'm happy. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I don't I can certainly, because it's a fairly universal, might be the wrong word, but a fairly relatable thing, that of course in any job you're going to have things you hate. There will be people I can certainly relate to, and I've certainly done my fair share of other odd jobs around. But yeah, so I don't know, I can sit here and, like a good grad student, and I can spurt Marx and Gramsci, and I can kind of talk about the alienation of these workspaces, but we all get it. We don't need to necessarily quote advanced theory to kind of tap into that. And I think this play just does that really well, that it is a funny comedy, but it really kind of does have its hand on the pulse of what is the problem here. The one thing that I find interesting is that the proposals that are always made in the play are kind of just very individual, and being trapped as an individual. Well, you got to work somewhere, so why not here? Or where would I work differently, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I do wonder, are there larger scale solutions that maybe could are these employees unionized, for example? Because a lot of big tech companies aren't, and maybe some kind of collective action, because we see them each have a monologue about how miserable they are. I would like to see maybe some collective action. Maybe they don't have to be enemies. Maybe Iris and Shelley don't have to hate each other when they realize that they're kind of in this together, but the infrastructure of the company forces them to be pit against each other, that Shelley is there because Iris isn't, and the job will only exist for one of them to stay after this contract ends. And hey, maybe that's the problem here, not the fact that, who's gonna win, that this company sets up a situation where one of them has to win at the expense of the other. And these are the problems that I think this play taps into. And maybe this is the point. The questions I'm asking are what it's trying to invite. I think of a play the very famous French-Canadian play Balconville by David Fenario, which we and even other French-Canadian play like Belle Sœur by Michel Tremblay. These plays all about how if we zero in on these characters individually, in their own minds, we realize that they all have the same struggles, yet they're competing with each other. If only they would realize that they have these like common struggles, common enemies, and they could unite against that. But of course they don't, and they just tear each other apart. This is a play like that, but one that I don't feel like is as putting a fine point on emphasizing that as a possible conclusion to take from it. And like, that's not a bad thing necessarily. It's telling its own type of story. And I was still able to leave it thinking these things. But yeah, I would maybe like to see a sequel play, if you will, where maybe they kind of fight back, but also to bring it back to tragedy again until these systems of oppression and economic coercion are changed. They don't really have a lot of options. But yes, so yeah, that's my thoughts on it. And like, yeah, and of course, I said this at the very beginning of, even if we haven't worked a 9-to-5 job, at some point during this pandemic, we've all been on a dysfunctional Zoom call with too many people, too much wind tunnel, and just communication breakdowns. And I think this play certainly captured that well in a nutshell.
Agreed. And I think that's the perfect note to end on.
Yes, this concludes our review of The Office, the American television sitcom. No, Michael, we say that in jest. This is a great play. And yes, we had a good time.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. All right. Well, before we go, first thing we also want to say once again, this troupe, this One for One collective, is currently fundraising to do their cross the channel trip. Maybe they'll even add Neil in as a character now because they're actually going to that end of the pond.
I will be curious how these kind of like international liaisons work in like an actual, like, you know, different cultural audience.
Do they
like
swap Neil up for a Canadian character?
Maybe. Or would that require all the characters to be British? And will they put on accents? And I don't know. Or will it just be, I'm sure they're probably just keeping it as it is and putting it on the road accordingly. But
yes, absolutely. Go down, check out the link below. For the Huns are going to Brighton, the Assembly Theatre One for One collective fundraiser they're running right now. You can either donate once or do a monthly donation to them. And your money goes towards a great, wonderful cause.
We hope you'll support them because it's a great show, and we'd love to help offset some of their costs for this production that I believe is happening regardless of whether or not they raise the funds. But if we can make it more feasible financially for them to do so, we would appreciate all of your support.
Yeah, perfect. All right. In the meantime, Ryan, give us that classic Ryan Borochovitz send off.
You can't follow me on social media. Well, you can. It exists. I'm not active. How about you? Where can people find and follow you?
Well, you can find and follow me at Mackenzie on all social media platforms. You can also follow my antics with Before the Downbeat, a musical podcast where we are wrapping up our 4th season. And let's just say Grease is the word for our season finale.
So, you're the one that I want.
Ooh. Those summer nights, Ryan. Those summer nights.
Tell me more. Tell me more.
I don't know, Ryan. I'm just a beauty school dropout.
Okay, this joke has gone on too long.
But yes, check on out For the Downbeat. Our wonderful associate producer Jill came on for an episode this season where we talked all about the puppet show Avenue Q, where we found out the internet was for a lot of things. All right. Other than that, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We got lots of great content coming your way. So stay tuned for more goodies. We have a few more opening nights on the schedule already that we'll be sharing with you. We got some great panels coming up and even the return of some roundtable discussions in the near future. So stay tuned for all that. In the meantime, everybody, stay healthy, stay safe, and enjoy those Zoom telecalls, everybody. Neil here.